All right, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all so much for joining us today. On behalf of AUVSI, I am very pleased to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon, Flying Drones in the World's Most Challenging Environments. So my name is Shannon Walker. I'm a Senior Program Manager here at AUVSI on the Strategic Programming team. And before we get started, we have a couple of those housekeeping notes that we always like to go over. So as always, all of the participant lines today will remain muted throughout the webinar. We are recording this program, and a viewing link is going to be emailed out to all attendees within the next week or so. So you can now view all of the webinars on AUVSI's new learning and engagement platform, AVL. If you are listening to our webinar today and you need any assistance, please send a note to our webinar leader using the chat button at the bottom of your screen. So after our presentation today, we are going to open up the session for Q&A. So attendees, you are encouraged to submit your questions at any time throughout today's webinar using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. But questions are going to be saved to be answered towards the end of the presentation. So please note that the Q&A box is a different box than the chat. So just make sure you're submitting all of those content questions for our speakers today using the Q&A button, which can be found right next to the chat. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'd very much like to welcome and thank Doodle Labs for their support of today's webinar. And we are excited to have three very knowledgeable and excellent speakers, all from Doodle Labs, here with us today. So we've got Dominic DeMarco, a senior sales engineer, Nate Lipka, the Senior Marketing Manager, and Amal Parikh, the VP of Marketing, all present with us today. So with that, we are thrilled to have you guys here. Can't wait to learn more about this exciting topic. And so with that, Nate, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Shannon. You're right. We're very excited to be here as well. We're organizational members at Doodle Labs of AUVSI. We go to Exponential every year. We're really excited for next year's edition in San Diego, very close to our home base in LA. And we've really enjoyed doing our past webinars with you here. If you go to doodlelabs.com for any of the attendees, you can see our past webinars that we've done, largely around the Blue US program with AUVSI. So yeah, today's session, very excited about this topic, flying drones in the world's most challenging environments. I'll give you a quick overview kind of what we're going to cover off here, and then I'm really excited to loop in my colleagues from Doodle Labs for a really good discussion today. So new drone platforms are pushing the limits on where and how drones are able to fly, whether in the dark, in inclement weather, in crowded urban settings, or in Ukraine in the face of the most aggressive jamming campaign in UAV history. Drones are navigating challenging environments that were previously thought unnavigable by uncrewed aircraft. It's in the battlefield, in public safety responses, and in commercial industrial facilities as well. So in today's webinar, we'll spotlight some of the newest high-performing UAV platforms on the market and in development. We'll get insight into the real challenges on the front lines in Ukraine, and we'll take a look under the hood to understand how Doodle Labs mesh networking technology empowers drones to maintain connectivity and perform at the highest level, no matter the environment. Share my screen here. All right, 1 moment. Murphy's Law of webinars. 1 moment, sorry.
Hi, my name is Amal Parikh. While Nate's pulling that up, I just wanted to jump in and just also speak to, like, we're very excited to talk about this topic. In our preparation for this topic as well, we got to connect with a lot of our customers operating in these types of environments and challenging conditions that we're talking about. And so what we're planning to take you through today is a bunch of case studies of some of these extreme examples, some of these really cutting edge use cases of drones, and how we're trying to support them with our mesh communications technology to support over those long ranges, high bandwidth scenarios, when you need to send video, things like that over encrypted links and things like that. So we'll take you through it just now. It looks like it's up.
Yep, thanks for that, Amal. Yep. Some of the specific environmental challenges we'll talk about in this session. Jamming in the battlefield, that's a really big one. Obviously, in Ukraine is kind of a leading topic there. Congestion in urban and industrial environments, inclement weather, nighttime low visibility, pretty much all of the terrible environments you can think of to really utilize collaborative robotics to make use of. We'll talk through some of the solutions, like Amol hinted at, multiband technology, Sense, which is what people are really excited about, and we're excited about as well, which is some of our newest anti-jamming capability, and really just long-range, high bandwidth, our waveform that we use to really achieve this. And some of the customers are listed here. We'll talk about each of those: Evolve Dynamics, PDW, UKR Spec Systems, FreeFly, Wave Aerospace, and Teal Drones. So yeah, first sort of sector we'll talk about is that battlefield jamming in the military and defense sort of space. I definitely think this is a good.
Actually, sorry, Nate, just before you give the intro on this topic, I just want to give a really quick intro to who we are at Doodle Labs and our Mesh Rider radio technology. I think it just sets the stage, and hopefully, everyone's coming here familiar with who we are. But if you aren't, we have cut our teeth on mesh radio technology over the last 5-10 years. We really focused on long-range communications for unmanned systems. I'm holding up just a couple of them. We have a full suite of products that are really designed around unmanned systems, long-range connectivity. This one in particular is what we designed for along in collaboration with our drone customers, because they needed something that was really low swap size, weight, and power consumption. It's actually the one that you're going to see in different configurations and different frequency configurations used by a lot of the customers we're going to talk about today. But we even have, a smaller one, as well as like different additions or capabilities like Wi-Fi hotspots or, a handheld version that can be used on a GCS. Our focus is really resilient communications in any type of situation. It's a little bit small, but over my shoulder, what you're seeing is this, like, we really focused on large scale networks that can support multiple robots, people as well, really anything that you're kind of designing around in any kind of situation. So we're dual use. We have commercial configurations, we have defense configurations, and really, however the system is being deployed, we're trying to be in service of that with a really reliable link to ensure that you can actually do what the robot is designed for.
That's great, thank you. And obviously we'll circle back around and get a little bit deeper under the hood in terms of how that technology works and how it's applied. But you mentioned both commercial and defense applications. We'll start with that defense area. Dom DeMarco, our other panel, I just want to take a chance to loop you in. I know you have an extensive military background, so this is kind of your wheelhouse. What's your kind of just initial POV on the importance of these types of comms within the defense space?
Yeah, Nate, thanks for the question. Really, it's I've had the last 10 years of having the pleasure of kind of working in both spaces, in the military experience as a tactical communicator for naval special warfare, and also in the commercial and defense industry as a support to enable those users, from doing ground mesh networks, air to ground, a lot of testing with UAVs, seeing the intricacies of how those things are developed and how the time and attention that is given to trying to make these modern solutions. It's really interesting to see the challenges that we have that are different in each space and that they're same in each space. And I'm really looking forward to diving into those with everybody on this webinar today.
Yeah, and the challenges, especially in this defense space, seem to be really complicated and many layered. So in advance of the session, I had a really good conversation with Mike Dewhurst. He's the founder of Evolve Dynamics. They're a customer of ours. You may have seen a recent press release we put out, so sort of formalizing our partnership with them. They're really proactive and active in the Ukraine space, providing Ukraine defense forces with their drones, specifically the Sky Mantis. So I had a good conversation with him. I wanted to play a clip where he kind of gives a pretty good overview of the specifics of the jamming challenge that they're facing in Ukraine and kind of what that looks like on the ground there. And I think it'll be a good jump off for our discussion within the defense space. So I'll play that now.
We can attest to the fact that when testing in Ukraine with different jamming systems, your radio performs really well. It survives that jamming, and that's one of the key points for us. And for your viewers, the effect for a radio that isn't resilient against electronic warfare is that you initially get degraded signal, and then you completely lose it, and it's as if the system has gone out of range. But it could happen literally tens of meters away from the takeoff point, and because it's almost, you know, the way jamming works in simple terms, if you compare it to audio, it's as if somebody turns on a really, really loud speaker right next to you, and you can't even hear yourself talk. That's basically the principle of electronic warfare or jamming. So you can't control the drone, you cannot land it, and normally jamming goes radio jamming control and video signal jamming goes hand in hand with GPS jamming. So if you have a system that isn't capable of GPS denied navigation and isn't capable of radio link resilience, then that system can be lost literally tens of meters away from the takeoff point. If GPS effects mean that it gets confused and it either starts going up or in a different direction or down because it's tricked into thinking that it's actually a lot higher than it is, then that system can crash. And if you've got obstacles in the way like trees, then the crash can be pretty horrific and the system can be completely written off. So electronic warfare is a very large problem on the front line at the moment, and combating it is important. In terms of non-military use, I would caution against too much sort of complacency and assuming that no radio jamming will ever be observed in the civilian world. National critical infrastructure like power stations, bridges, railway networks, etc. They're all sometimes targeted by terrorist organizations, including Russia. And it is possible, and it has been seen in the past, where either rogue agents or local covert terrorists, etc., can jam in those environments. So it's a good idea and good practice to have a system that whose radio link is resilient, even if it's just for civilian use.
Yeah, and I don't want to lose track of Mike's last point there, which seems more than salient, which is that interference and specifically jamming is a big issue to be addressed on the commercial side and the defense side. But since we're on the defense topic, Dom, I wanted to just kind of get your take on Mike's input there. And I know that resiliency and the need for that is obviously something that we're preaching on the Doodle Labs side and what we're building into our products as well.
Yes, Mike brought up a lot of really great points. I mean, just from the stance of the commercial consideration of we can't be jammed, it's absolutely true. We jam ourselves a lot of the times. And as a communicator, I can tell you I've spent hundreds of hours trying to troubleshoot communications. It's an invisible enemy because the only way you're jamming RF is through another RF emitter. So these considerations of how we operate in a mission standpoint from the military, we have a PACE plan, which is primary, alternative, contingency, and emergency, where if something doesn't work, we have to move to the next thing quickly so we can keep the mission going. The challenges that you're seeing with a lot of these commercial or military drones is in the older days, you'd have a single frequency on a radio to command and control, and the enemy can identify that easily now within minutes. So being able to jam that is an easy thing to do. And once you're jammed to that frequency, you're limited in your capability. You don't know what's ahead of you. You don't know what your 360-degree view is, and you are putting lives in danger. So with multiband radios, that's a great way to kind of have that contingency plan of if I'm being jammed in frequency A, we can go to frequency B, C, or D.
That's right. And just to add to what Dom's saying, so the way that we think about multiband and all of our Mesh Rider radios are now multiple frequency band configurations, it's just more tools in your toolkit, as you mentioned. And so how we approached this was we also had single frequency band radios. That was the standard, as you mentioned. And then we worked closely with DIU for the Blue UAS program. And they gave us some parameters for a hex band radio, where they wanted coverage over the 6 frequency bands between 1.6 gigahertz and 2.5. They actually didn't need it to be in one single radio, but we were able to do that with this mini OEM form factor in Helix. Helix is our offering for defense configurations or federal frequency bands. And so we also go down to L and S band and up to NATO C band in various configurations. But overall, what's that in service of is more frequency bands in a single radio means less integration work, and less ability to, if you are being jammed in one, you're not limited in what you're able to do. And that's also layering on top what we just recently announced and released, which is our Sense technology. And that's where we started with multiple frequency bands and you had more tools in your toolkit. Now you're actually able to actively use all of them by with Sense being able to experience interference on the data link and actually be able to intelligently move to better performing channels within a frequency band or to other frequency bands altogether. And so specifically in terms of counteracting jamming, as we talked about, which is just noise on the link, we're able to move to better performing parts of a data link, and you're just have a much wider highway basically with multiple lanes now to facilitate that better traffic.
Yeah, and
Sorry,
on screen we have the Sky Mantis, which is the platform from Vault Dynamics. We'll talk more about that later on, but go ahead, Dom.
Yeah, just to layer on just the advantages of what we're developing with Sense, we're really breaking open that door of being able to allow people to do their primary job instead of being an RF troubleshooter. We don't want you to spend 45 minutes or hold up a job or a mission or a capability when we have technology today that can make these decisions for us in milliseconds, minutes, get us ready to go and do what we're supposed to do, right? Which is our primary role in any setting. So.
Yeah, and good segue to another customer of ours, which is UKR Spec Systems. Dom, if you want to give us a little bit of an overview on their capabilities, they're taking these features and really putting them to their paces out in the world.
Thanks, Nate. UKR Spec Systems, as you can assume, that they're based out of Ukraine, and they're a key supplier of drones. They build several platforms to support various mission-critical use cases. They've reported to do on the front lines at least around 80 kilometers over enemy lines, sending full HD video from the ground control station to one of their key platforms, which is what you see on that video, is that mini Shark UAV. It's a real key capability for Ukrainian defense forces and some of the most heavily contested, heavily jammed airspace in the world right now. And we keep having success with them. And this is one of these really wonderful use cases where we see, one, a blue UAS system not made in China, also having capability of not one, but several different bands being used in success and tested, proven. And we've been sending those over for months now, over a year, maybe, actually. I'm losing track of time.
Yeah, another one in the field. We have many customers who are kind of doing this as well, but another one of our partners is PDW, and I know you've been working with them very closely. They're using them all over the world, but especially in those military applications, really making use of a lot of the different mesh configurations. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, PDW is great. They're a lot of fun. They're based out of Huntsville, Alabama. They're making a really incredible platform called the C100. I've mentioned this to other folks, but it's a platform you got to hear to really be impressed by because it's so quiet. And so they are designing their platform for defense applications as well. And what they're really taking advantage of, we've talked about multiband, we've talked about Sense, and that is really, being deployed across all these platforms. But what they're uniquely also taking advantage of, and you'll see in this video, is multi-agent missions and the mesh capabilities of the radios. And so what's being visualized here is, in a defense scenario or defense deployment, you don't always get to pre-plan or, choose the terrain and the spaces that you have to go deploy into. And sometimes you're going to hit obstacles or difficulties just by the terrain itself. And so when needing to overcome something like a large hill that would obstruct line of sight, having the mesh capabilities built into the radios and having multiple agents flying together, you're actually able to overcome those obstacles with a relay configuration, still maintaining links to the furthest out drone or robot by doing that in an intelligent way, taking advantage of how these robots can fly together.
Yeah, and Dom, I wanted to ask you, our next section that we're kind of diving into is to do with
We've got multiple public safety.
sorry, team. Is more to do with industrial and commercial settings. In your role, you're interfacing with all sorts of our customers on both sides of that fence, on the defense side and the commercial side. You laid out your career background. So is there a discernible difference, like sort of in your approach to helping out those customers and the conversations and the types of challenges that they're facing?
Yeah, Nate, it's super interesting because, coming from a defense space, I was always assuming there's them, then there's us, right? But a lot of challenges are kind of similar, which makes my job a little bit easier, where they're just having issues with getting line of sight. And a lot of limiting factors are that some companies specialize in point-to-point communications and offer mesh as a side, where on the other hand, it's our specialty. So being able to have radios that can be strategically placed and also dynamically moved to kind of run and go around those corners, go down to the tunnels, go over the hills, if you will, to establish connectivity where it was previously denied. And you can use these things in similar ways where, for instance, in the military, we'd have to use satellite extension and use mesh networks to get satellite communications over denied areas and environments. The same thing happens with first responders, search and rescue, where they need satellite to go over the hills when they're trying to find somebody missing. So they use the same thing by plugging a radio to a Starlink, having a drone relay it, and getting that data back to the command center. So decision makers can figure out where they need to be and where people need to go to dedicate resources to.
Yeah, and Mike really kind of forewarned us, for lack of a better word, at the end of the initial clip I played, that it would be unwise to not consider the implications of jamming and other interference in public safety spaces that extends to commercial spaces. I know Doodle Labs is really like a dual use offering, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, what you're seeing on the screen is the Free Flight Astro, and they, like us, have a real commercial focus. And so on the commercial side, I mentioned how we have offerings on defense frequency configurations as well as commercial. So our multiband offering on the commercial side has both 900 megahertz and 2.4 gigahertz, the Wi-Fi band. It's unlicensed. I forgot to mention that how multiband is really in service of global deployment as well, again, without having to do integration work, but is also in terms of that resiliency of link. And so where you have 900 megahertz and 2.4, like in the US, they're both really good bands to use. Something like Free Flight that is operating in urban environments, they're not experiencing jamming per se, but they're experiencing a very similar problem caused by interference of just a bunch of other devices, a bunch of other Wi-Fi devices in urban environments. And so it causes the same potential degradation of the link, noise, and limitations on what you can pass. But when you have the ability to switch away or move away from that interference to a better performing band, that's really the same use case, but for commercial and unlicensed customers.
Yeah, Dom, you mentioned the sort of surprise, so to speak, coming into the commercial side after so much experience on the military side. What sort of lessons do you think you've learned from these commercial folks that, or the other way around, that you can kind of inform either side of that fence and kind of raise all boats with one tide, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely. It's really listening to the customers who listen to their customers in turn. Because, as an OEM, we help build solutions for those customers. And some of these challenges and considerations are always common, where it's choosing something that isn't important on such a small system. Every component is equally important. There's just a huge value to these considerations of longevity, success, and resiliency on just how you factor in your video being relayed over longer distances, how you can have these advanced settings where you can have special optimization on your data to get delivered reliably. These are all factors of, you have these large payloads. We want to make sure that these get distributed in a successful way. And I think Doodle has that really nice middle ground where we can be simple or advanced, where we can kind of optimize those use cases for every customer. And that's been really nice, because I haven't found a customer where they've had a good use case where we've turned them away. And yeah.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, I think I liked your point, Amol, earlier on. You mentioned about not always being able to plan 100% for all the conditions that you're going to encounter, and I think that's maybe for me. I'm not an engineer on the ground, but for me, it's easy to lose sight of that when you're walking exponential and seeing the shiny new tech and seeing like clear, especially in San Diego next year, very clear skies for demos and stuff. Really, we're looking at trying to empower these OEMs that are building drones and ultimately their end users to be able to like tackle terrible conditions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, as we're about to get into it, especially on the inclement weather side of things, when you don't have the things that you normally rely on to fly your drone, where usually it's by visual line of sight, you're really relying on what the data link can support there. What you're getting across in your GCS, reliability of if there is a feed, however you're maintaining that connectivity. I think it becomes even more important, especially if you have less of the other things that you normally rely on in those circumstances.
Yeah, and on the weather side, I mean, we're talking about aerial vehicles here. So weather really has traditionally grounded aerial vehicles, helicopters, and more recently drones. When the weather gets really bad, when wind is intense, when there's heavy rains, those are the times when this technology, traditionally has been grounded. It's not really available for use for some of these use cases. But kind of harkening back to my conversation with Mike Dewhurst, again, founder from Evolve Dynamics, his point of view was really interesting, kind of holds opposite of that, which is that when the going gets tough and the conditions are bad weather-wise, that's when the value of drones that are able to be deployed is actually at its highest. So I want to play this clip. He kind of makes the case for that argument.
We've got multiple public safety agencies in the UK and in the US using our systems. They are also used by some inspection companies for gas leak detection and applications like that. And the more capable your system is in any weather, the more hours of use you get out of it. So in the UK, weather is notoriously not great quite a large proportion of the time. If you go to some areas in the UK, especially Wales, is even a higher percentage of stronger rain and faster wind. So you need very capable platforms in terms of weather resilience to be able to operate in those conditions. Criminals don't look for good weather windows to operate in. In fact, they typically will pick bad weather windows because they know that some public safety agencies will be restricted in their ability to respond during bad weather. So for criminals, it's perfect time to be doing something. Equally, if you think about it, then in bad weather is when accidents are more likely to happen. Car collisions, train derailments, and you name it, or even people getting lost in bad weather and then being very susceptible to hypothermia. So a lot of all the things that are listed there are all time critical. So you want a system that can deploy rapidly and respond to pretty life-threatening situations and in pretty much any condition. So our system can fly in winds up to 75 kilometers an hour, and we have never experienced rain to date where we weren't able to operate. So we've had lots of situations, excuse me, where the operator needed to take a break or to dry off, or even when they had to pour the water off of the remote controller because it was literally pooling due to rain being so strong. But we've never had the system fail in flight due to bad weather.
So thankfully where I'm at, it's a sunny day and I'm indoors, so I don't have to worry about any of these conditions. But I mean, I think this really, like Mike's point, seems to speak really directly to Dom, I think you mentioned earlier animal as well. People don't really want to have to worry about the tech operating once they're actually out in the field. It's more about having something that's reliable, that they can depend on, so they don't really have to worry about RF and the rest of that.
Yeah, just to continue on that point, it's really like a core to our design philosophy with our whole line of communications technology. We really took the approach that while it's an integral component to being able to fly a drone or really operate any type of unmanned system, to have a reliable data link, once it's working, we know our customers, that's not what they want to worry about. They've designed a really sophisticated platform to do some really important jobs. And there's a lot of things like weather to have to worry about to have a successful mission or to really put that system to work. And so we continue to take in customer feedback, but we really try to design around all of those variables that are being brought to us that our customers are operating in or need to work around. And we have our lineup right now with the Mesh Router Radio lineup, but we continue to take in that feedback and try to make a more resilient and robust networking solution, other form factors, other frequency configurations, things like that.
Yeah, and Evolved Dynamics really is taking advantage of, again, of a lot of that stuff. You see on the screen here, we flashed it earlier as well. This is the Sky Mantis, which is a mid-sized multi-rotor drone, weather resistant, resistant to heavy rain, heavy winds. Comes with a lot of different payloads, can kind of be swapped in and out. Again, their selling points kind of align with what you were just talking about, which is being able to like deploy into any of those conditions and really be able to be successful. Dom, I know you mentioned, you alluded to it earlier, but even from your background, your military experience in the field, things are just changing so quickly. It was maybe so difficult to get a drone up off the ground, and you're dealing with super expensive sort of equipment and all of that back in the day. Now we have these things that can be packed in a backpack and just deployed. Can you talk to me about just how quickly things are changing and how that's really affecting for people on the ground, both in the military and the commercial space?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was downrange in Iraq, we were flying drones that were about fixed wing, extremely expensive at $25-50 million. And, for good reason, it has to survive weather. But we've come to a point where drones are being widely used to answer a lot of the modern problems today, where it's just not feasible to invest in a drone that expensive. So now you have to take companies like Evolve and PDW that are answering these questions at a fraction of the cost and being able to sustain these weather issues that in duress, where it's not just about what the weather does as well, right? It's what the people react to the weather, where we take a lot of cellular and just regular communications that's publicly accessible for granted. But when it becomes stress, when a hurricane hits, when a tsunami hits, those cellular towers go out, and the value of a private wireless network becomes super, super important. I mean, it's not the lack of control that you have on a satellite network, or you can't tell the satellite network to transmit more power, more throughput. You can't tell the cellular towers to move. You can't have that control. So when you have everybody making phone calls, trying to see if everybody's all right, you're not going to get anything through for first responders or decision makers to really help out the way they need to. And that's really why Doodle Labs, and we have this private long range network that allows miles of coverage, a mesh reliability, and a resiliency that that you don't need to put on a $25 million system. You could put it on these systems, affordable, deployable, and scalable. So I mean, that's what we're really at. I'm excited because it's here now, but it's going to explode with the use cases of how we're using AI and how we're developing firmware and how we're developing features internally with Doodle.
Yeah, and this video that we're showing now, this is Wave Aerospace, a little bit of a sizzle reel around their Falcon UAV. Very similar, IP66 weatherproof rated, handles rain, snow, can fly at 80 knots, and can handle wind at about that speed as well. In the video, they show a helicopter sort of spinning out of control in a terrible environment. I think for a lot of this technology, one of the challenges, sort of parallel challenges for the OEMs that are building the drones, is like people have to trust this technology to work in order to make the jump from like a legacy technology, whether that's comms or something like a helicopter, to trust that we can send this drone out in these conditions and it's actually going to work for us.
That's exactly right. I mean, in general, what we see across defense and commercial, but the use of unmanned systems is really to avoid having to put people in harm's way, and often for other life-saving use cases as well, or simply like, when it's infrastructure inspection, things like that. But again, avoiding having to put people in harm's way to do those important jobs. As Nate mentioned, reliability, I think you've heard it from us a bunch of times on this talk, but it is the thing where it comes up so much, and is what we have is the top of mind, where our customers aren't going to have their drones replace what people are doing now. if people can't rely on their function and them doing exactly what they are supposed to do. Our customers can't rely on our products unless we're providing that reliable network every time, and being able to compensate for the things that are those unplanned parts of a mission. When you deploy your environment is different for various reasons, whether it's interference intentional by jamming or unintentional, but because of a bunch of other devices on the network, weather, anything like that.
Yeah, and the last bucket here we have in terms of challenges we haven't even talked about, which is the nighttime and low visibility. And in a lot of ways, this is like a layer of challenges and problems. So like if you're in a battlefield environment, for example, so much of clandestine nighttime operation is such a big part of a lot of these defense operations. And so you're already dealing with that jamming, you're dealing with the terrain, you're dealing with an enemy that you're trying to steer clear of, and then you throw darkness on top of it and you can't even see the equipment anymore. Dom, I know this is a good spot to talk about one of the key partnerships we have, and this is a good forward-facing one, but I know with Teal drones and the SR program that they're developing for us. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Teal, it's a Red Cats. It's a subsidiary where you've got them responding to an Army RFI for to create a rucksack portable, like a big backpack that a soldier carries with a small UAS, offering rapid deployable reconnaissance capabilities for small but nimble units like a platoon rather than a battalion of 100 people. You're having these teams be quiet under this cover of night, trying to get situational awareness in a way that wasn't possible because you couldn't carry it in a rucksack. It was like putting together an IKEA furniture. It took a lot of pieces and a lot of movement to get a UAS to provide this intel. But what Teal answers is they've got a small, packable drone that can come up in minutes and bring amazing payloads like thermal imagery, AES-256 encrypted video to ground stations miles away. And that's just a really great example of what a blue UAS system looks like and how we're answering these calls for DoD RFIs and working together with companies like Teal. It gets me excited. So.
Yeah, and I know for Teal, in Teal's case, they already have, obviously the Teal 2 is active now, but we're working toward the future development for SRR. Well, I know we have a lot of customers that have platforms that are already in production, and a lot of times they come to us because they're looking to kind of solve these problems. So it's not always necessarily brand new platforms. It's them looking for an improved data link to like improve that quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Teal is a really good example of that, where it really started when they were having to work through some challenges they were having with their current data link, just to have that reliable long range coverage. But it was also something that we were able to collaborate on because they're now able to take advantage of our multiband platform. They're using Helix, has those 6 frequency bands, taking advantage of Sense to be able to intelligently move away from jamming, which they get to plan ahead for with the types of missions that they're planning for. So we started from just one part of it, just more reliable long range comms, but we look forward to working with them closely. On that point is actually Teal's pretty focused on the defense side, but it goes back to the dual use, like FreeFly is an example, who are looking at both commercial use cases and defense, and we have a bunch of customers that are dual use as well. And the way that we design the platform is we maintain the footprint, the actual form factor within a product category like the mini OEM, but it's available in those federal frequency bands as well as commercial frequencies. So it's just a drop-in replacement. And so we did that intentionally to be able to facilitate just ease of being able to support or go after any of those opportunities that they're pursuing.
Yeah, and I think this is a good opportunity. Just looking at my watch, we've gotten a flood of questions coming across, so I'd really love to open up the Q&A section. We'll cherry pick some that we can kind of try to answer on the line here. Just a reminder to everyone, keep sending those in the Q&A section. We certainly won't be able to get to everything live on the session, but we're definitely committed to following up with everyone shortly after the session to give you your answers and give as much insight as we can. First one I'll ask, we've gotten some questions. Well, in the beginning, you kind of showed a quick peek at kind of like the family of products that we have in terms of mesh router radios. Some of the questions we've gotten are about the different configurations that are possible. So obviously there's ground to air, but the person was really interested in I think specifically from the PDW, like the multi-drone sort of approach. And then there was some questions also about ground to ground, either between people and people in UGVs as well. So maybe you can speak to the different options.
I wish I had more hands to be able to hold all of them up, but I'll do my best. That these are 4 of our primary form factors on the mesh router radio side. And just to also show, this one here is what we call the wearable. It's a handheld. This is an attachable battery. This is the radio itself. And so this can also be used as an external, or like a vehicle mounted or pole mounted, something like that. The reason I'm showing all of them is actually they all work together. They're really designed around just where does it need to be integrated, or how are you using it. Obviously, the handheld for people versus if you are designing around a system like a drone where size and weight is a constraint. We have both of these options, but the main difference is all of our radio platform is 2x2 MIMO, meaning 2 antennas. It helps with range, reliability, making sense of non-optimal signal paths. But for the really size and weight constrained platforms, this one is a single antenna option. So those are just some of the choices that are being made. They speak to each other though. All of our configurations, all of our form factors really do speak are designed to be able to work together. So there's no, on our side with our radio platform, there's no ground side radio, air side radio. There's no distinction there. It's really on our platforms that are using an integrated radio on the GCS, as well as an integrated radio, obviously on the drone side, it's often the same mini on both sides. PDW is actually, they designed something which they called the robot head, but it's basically a third radio built into just a little enclosure that is used separately from the GCS, but to be able to bring other devices onto it. They're actually looking at replacing that with our wearable because it's IP68 rated. It can handle weather. It can handle all kinds of stuff. It comes with that attachable battery, or you can give it continuous power, and it has a Wi-Fi hotspot. So it just makes it easier to bring multiple devices onto that shared network, really just based on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, we got a really interesting question. It was a little more specific just around that last point, which was marrying together drones and then like people with like wearable technology on the ground, and what you're describing there in terms of the wearable kind of makes that possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. We were really focused on, I think I said at the top, like drone technology or radio robotics technology. And then we realized over the last year or so that, actually people are still needing to be a part of it as well. And that's where the genesis of developing the handheld, the wearable radio came from. We were already working with really long range mesh or point-to-point networks for different robotic systems. And then we brought in the wearable, which again is just can be a replacement for the radio that needs to be integrated onto the GCS side, reduce that integration work, make it easier to bring on other devices. Or, when you're planning for a more ad hoc type of use case where you want additional stakeholders to maybe multicast the video feed down from the drone, they can do that by those additional participants or those additional nodes, really just using a wearable to join that existing point-to-point or mesh network.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of questions. Naturally, the topic is around pushing limits, and a lot of our customers, the cool stuff they're doing, we're naturally getting a lot of questions about the limits that can be pushed with our technology. So, Dom, I want to ask you, I've gotten a few questions around, distance, to kind of paint a picture of what kind of distance can be achieved here, specifically for the drone use case. And then also, there's been a lot of interest, I think, in the mesh configuration, specifically for things like swarming and having multiple drones in the air. So maybe I'll back up and ask, tell us a little bit about the distance that has been achieved by some of our customers, and sort of like how many drones can you fly up in the air at once with this type of technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So with our radios, they're 1-watt radios. You got 30 dB transmit, but dual stream MIMO. And what some of our customers have success with can vary from 5 to all the way to 100 kilometers passing kilobits. It's really about the ability to have a low-cost system that's under $5,000. Sorry, someone was asking how much does it cost to invest in the right accessories to hit those distances that you're trying to get, depending on what your use case is. Where parabolic sector antennas, tracking systems can hit long ranges with our cards. We've had success with them and we've continued to. And in the level of what you can do on the ground, I've done tests with just radios in my backpack, driving 3 kilometers, passing data, getting GPS, chat messaging, and video. So it's based upon, it's great to have a steak, but what do you have accompanying it to really invest to make it a really complete dish, right? And that's really the nice thing about it, where when you're scaling, going into production, trying to invest and make these unique systems and solutions, we definitely have that competitive pricing and capability for to make that use case happen. And you also had something with scalability. I didn't want to ignore that. You absolutely can scale right out of the box, the radios 15 to 20 units. We actually created a feature to answer the call of what happens when we exceed those numbers. That's our dynamic mesh licensing that we do. And we allow up to 100 radios or even more to communicate data reliably, where that just kind of helps with the scaling to help every radio kind of act like a wireless mesh network at prioritizing data more effectively. And we've had customers have success running hundreds of robots in a warehouse, being able to communicate and not bump into each other and make things happen at that level.
Yeah, at the risk of, I don't want to make this into an infomercial because that's not what this is, but we have gotten a couple questions about cost. And well, maybe you want to just speak to the commercials just a little bit in terms of like what the process looks like to purchase these things, how that testing
Yeah, sure. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, and just to speak to that generally, I've showed so many different form factors, and I mentioned that we have configurations in Helix, the defense configurations, as well as commercial options. So those are all different variables, basically, in that go into cost. But we really approached cost from an affordability point of view. For us, we believe in really the future of deploying robotics for both for work, basically, for defense applications as well as industrial, like bridge inspections, things like that. And for that to be possible, public safety as well, it has to be priced at a place where it can actually be built in and scaled up as those really as that future starts to materialize. So we really designed around that as well as high performance. So anyway, we'd be happy to have you get in touch. I think if you have specific projects that you would like to discuss and see if we have solutions that we might be able to support, you can get in touch using our website. We have a form. We take a very consultative approach to new customers, where we would learn about your project, which of our radio, we'll make a recommendation on which of our radios we think would be the best solution there, get you started with some samples and really start to see the performance for yourself. But I think we can get into further details when we know specifically what you're looking for.
That's great. I want to ask both of you. So part of the fun of these types of sessions, and actually just being at Doodle Labs in general, is learning about all the great things that our customers are achieving. Like we're designing for different use cases, but I think part of the theme of this whole thing is that the end users are the ones that are like putting our products through the paces, putting them in environments, seeing what they're capable of, making it happen. Dom, I'll start with you. What do you, in terms of like the future, what do you sort of see coming around the corner here? What should we sort of be looking out for? You already mentioned how earlier on things were a certain way in terms of deploying drones in the military. Now it's completely different. Like, what's the direction that we're sort of headed right now?
Yeah, I mean, autonomous systems aren't going anywhere anytime fast, right? And what we're going to be looking at is how we as a unit, like a company, an industry, react to what's going on in the battle space and then also in the commercial space, where I feel like there will be a reaction with both. They're somehow intertwined. I'm not sure at what capacity just yet, but developing the technology further is going to be we're going to step back from high throughput. I think everyone wants to have the highest possible throughput. They start realizing once we start challenging these, there's effective data, there's data that you want and data that you need, and being able to have units that you can prioritize and network and mesh and grow and scale, those are the things and considerations that start to develop further, right? And then we start looking at how we assess frequency and spectrum as well. It's going to become a battle of spectrum, and it's going to be one of those, oh, well, what do I do when this frequency is occupied? How do I move forward? And can I hit these distances? It's going to be, what is the next frequency that's going to be free that nobody's using? And we're already looking into that too. So I'm excited to see where we take 5 gigahertz channel. That's going to be the one thing I would say for the commercial industry, because that's going to be burst wide open with FCC pushing some things forward, opening up about 100 and something megahertz of spectrum to use for the commercial industry. So that's the one thing I would say that we're looking at developing and improving.
Mm-hmm.
How about yourself, Amol?
Yeah, for me, I think it's really just the way that we've approached internally. This, Nate, that we just keep referring to it as like our big idea. It's the fact that today we spoke a lot about drone technology and places that drones are being deployed. But for us, drones are one of these solutions that we support. We also support UGVs, quadrupeds, things like that, ground robotics, AMRs and warehouse spacing, and now connected team solutions as well, like firefighters and public safety teams that need private wireless networking solutions in previously disconnected or in emergency response situations when existing networks could be damaged or unavailable. And so what I get really excited about right now is thinking about the full holistic solution that everyone's really kind of designing pieces towards. But when they start to get integrated, drones in collaboration with UGVs, with teams, all kind of working together, being deployed together, and being able to maintain communications that are on that private side, either because that just is separate and available to them, or because it's otherwise not available with other networking solutions. And so starting to see what's possible there.
Wonderful. We're running up against time here, so I just want to take a moment to say thanks for everyone for attending. We've shared during the live session some information, a bunch of releases, kind of detailing a little bit more about all the technology, all the platforms that you saw on the webinar today, as well as our partnerships going forward. A reminder, you can always go to doodlelabs.com. We have all of our webinar recordings there. We have all information on all of our products, and we're really excited to continue to highlight a lot of the great work that our partners are doing. Special thanks to our partners for providing all the video and some of the information that you got today for the session itself. Any last words, Amol?
No, that's it. Again, just to reiterate, is that we take that very consultative approach to just seeing if we have a solution that works for you, being able to make some recommendations on our technology, or really where you might be better served. To be honest, as well, sometimes we find that our radios could be a little bit overkill for what the actual use case is. So anyway, we encourage you to get in touch if this is something that we can support, or if you're interested in learning more about our products. We'd be happy to chat. Yeah, that's about it.
And Tom, final words from you.
Likewise, I really enjoyed the whole talk about just the challenges in RF, and I love talking about it offline with customers. And like Amal said, it might not be a fit, but it might be, and we're always open, just kind of talking about your use case and seeing how we can help. I'm just really excited for our future releases of how we're going to take things like Sense and our spectrum and improve it and go further, and just keep in touch, because we're going to be coming out with some cool things in the next few months.
Yeah, speaking of it, this will be a theme that we carry into the year. I think interference avoidance is a huge topic and a huge challenge across the board for all of our customers. So we're looking forward to continuing the discussion and discourse on that, presenting on it at Exponential, and continuing to have more sessions great sessions like this with AUVSI. So thanks so much for everyone for attending, and I'll pass it back over to Shannon. Thanks again.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks, Nate. I'd like to echo the sentiment on behalf of AUVSI. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Nate. Thanks, Amal, for this excellent presentation discussion today on a super important topic. And thank you, Doodle Labs, for supporting the webinar. As Nate mentioned, we got flooded with a ton of questions today that we just don't have time to answer live. So attendees, if if you had a question that didn't get answered today, as Nate shared earlier, they are committed to following up individually after the webinar, so be on the lookout for that communication. Additionally, attendees, you will receive a link for today's webinar recording in the next week or so. And all of our recordings are available on AUVSI's learning and engagement platform, Able, as well as with Doodle Labs, as they mentioned. So when you visit our Able, make sure you check out all of the different areas that you can go to. It's a great networking site, and I really encourage you to get involved with it. So if anybody has any additional questions for our team today, please feel free to reach out to us at education@auvsi.org. And lastly, today's program is copyrighted by AUVSI with all rights reserved. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today and for this great discussion. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.